Vetements was a shooting star in fashion, growing to even mainstream fame extremely quickly, with one of the two founders, Demna, being named as creative director of Balenciaga within only 2 years of launching the brand. But even before the Balenciaga scandal, Vetements' popularity took a real dive, fading into the background just as quickly as it lit up. Yet, now they've started looking at the brand from a whole new perspective, and it seems as if their light is about to rise once again. This video is sponsored by June's Journey. June's Journey is a free-to-download game that I've been playing recently. It's a murder mystery-themed mansion-building game where you can customize and remodel and fix your own mansion and garden island. However, for me, the best bit is actually the gameplay feature, which is effectively an I Spy game where you find various hidden objects to progress through the story and the chapters. Usually I enjoy mobile games with building elements anyway, but because the game itself has such a unique murder mystery twist, I unusually found myself returning to the same levels over and over again, even though it had less of a progression element, just because it was so fun to play. Unfortunately, I can't show you anything past chapter 2 as to not ruin any surprises, but incredibly, with the twists that come after that, the game just continues to get increasingly fun as you play, especially if you're into story games or games with lore, because of the murder mystery element, which is not scary, don't worry. If you're interested, please do download from the link in the description or by scanning my QR code, which is on screen now. Vetements debuted in March 2014 with this Autumn-Winter 14 collection that, as far as I can tell, was on the Paris Fashion Week schedule as a presentation. There is extremely little information documented from this first collection still online today, and to be honest, I don't remember any press specifically from this first collection either, which is strange because firstly, presenting on Paris Fashion Week schedule is expensive, and secondly, even though the clothes were plain, they had quite a marketable concept around the brand. Specifically, that the clothes were clothes, and the whole fashion industry had become conceited, trying to outdo one another with superfluous design. And yet, industry attention really only seemed to pick up steam after their second collection, Spring-Summer 15, in which they debuted their first catwalk presentation. At this point, their perspective became more explicitly the angle of the company. Vetements was creating just simple, well-made clothes with supposedly no gimmick. Retroactively, this explained the first collection's absence of a head designer or creative director, because they had begun by championing themselves as a faceless collective, meaning to give flowers to the often faceless teams that are so integral to almost every brand. And it also explained why both collections did not make for a cohesive story, because a story was purposefully absent as it was part of that superfluous haughtiness that is fashion. And yet, while they claimed this as evidence of their gimmick-less fashion, of course that was the gimmick, and as such it was taken as a satire on the fashion industry as a whole. A really refreshing, new, ironic take on fashion and the fashion industry, the likes of which have been mainly absent from fashion since perhaps Franco Moschino. As a result, it's understandable how this was the first collection that garnered them so much fame too, as a catwalk presentation is easier to find a promotional platform for, and because they went back on their initial idea of being a faceless collective after the two brothers Demna and Goram stepped forward to claim the praise and to explain the concept behind the brand, releasing very quotable lines on the collection, like, "If we spend more than 20 minutes on it, we just cancel it because it doesn't feel right," succinctly explaining the idea of the brand as commentary on the superfluous of the fashion industry. Basically, explaining Vetements as a brand was ironic. This pessimistic brand perspective was risky, of course, but it also certainly helped promotionally that when discussing the brand, their point of view was often validated by Demna's design background. He was an alumni of the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp and held senior design positions at Louis Vuitton and Maison Margiela, the latter of which is also known for subverting our idea of fashion, further adding credibility to this pessimistic, tired viewpoint that Vetements had. To quote his 2016 interview with the Business of Fashion directly, "The frustration was with the cycle. The creative cycle that didn't really coincide at all with the production side, and the demands and the number of pieces that we had to make. The pieces became kind of soulless, because they had to be made, but they didn't really have a reason to be. That was the most frustrating part for me. Needless to say, the collection was a sensation. He visualized the same feeling that many people in fashion were having at that time, and it was a great outlet for them to express their own frustrations. So, just by the next season, Autumn/Winter 15, they welcomed Kanye West to the front row, and if memory serves, gained them a stockist in Dover Street Market. Which I should repeat is from memory. I know they did have stockists from the first collection. In fact, they've always claimed to be profitable, but I just couldn't find when exactly Dover Street Market first stocked them. I just remember specifically going to Dover Street Market personally to find it after the Autumn/Winter 16 panel from Show Studio, which was done when the Autumn/Winter 15 collection would have been in stores. Also, if my memory serves again, it ties in very much with the first real complaint about the brand, which was initially what got me interested, that its price point was simply too high. In the aforementioned Show Studio panel, in fact, they reference hoodies being £400 and £900 on jeans, with Lou Stoppard's viewpoint being, why should we not spend more money on something we wear every day when it's perfectly normal to spend even more than that on formal wear, which we may wear only 1 to 3 times. The counterpoint from Aya, the fashion journalism student on the far left, being that firstly, the row produces equally as well-made, if not better-made casual wear for less, with the same low-cost per-wear goal, and that Vetements' offering is particularly seasonal, meaning that the cost per wear in general for Vetements products would be less anyway. This was, by and large, the prevailing conversation about Vetements at the time, and it caused a lot of buzz. In a way, it was like modern-day shock marketing, in that it purposely caused controversy and discussion in order to garner attention while hiding behind the ironic nature of the brand. If they're making fun at the frivolity of fashion, surely the price point is part of that. In fact, the buzz around the brand was so much by this point that within only months of this collection debuting, Demna was a finalist for the 2015 LVMH prize, very much legitimizing Vetements' place in high fashion. Though this was obviously very much helped by his industry connections given his provenance and because of the truly phenomenal PR surrounding the brand. The clothes themselves were very simple, purposefully minimally designed clothes, and literally the brand was explicitly only about world building. They were open about the fact that they barely designed these clothes at all. And yet the influence of this incredibly skillful world building would only increase, soon becoming truly palpable by Spring/Summer 16, in which there was so much buzz around the brand that this DHL top, worn on the catwalk by then street style star Gosha Rubchinskiy, whose brand I do have a video on already, went completely viral, causing the brand to be discussed even outside of fashion circles and spawning fakes from long before the t-shirt was able to be purchased in stores. Specifically, the collection was shown in October, and the collection would only come into stores in March of 2016, which according to this Guardian article meant that by at least February, so 2 months earlier, fakes were easily purchasable online, and as little as $25 on eBay, or even as little as $6.50 on the DHL website, a fraction of what the 185 Vetements version would soon cost. Obviously, the cost was the main controversy here. Most people thought this price point was ridiculous, and it did cause an enormous stir across the mainstream press. A few brands that are only a year and a half old can really claim. It's so hard to become the story of the season for any brand in general, so to achieve that within only 2 years of launch, this was huge. Meaning that while the world discussed ethical price points, Demna had already proven himself to be an exceptional world builder and an exceptional marketer. No other brand had succeeded in debuting a product that was so cheap to make at such a high price point while having it be as widely desirable as this top was. Other brands like Marcello Berlon Country of Milan, who was popular at the time, were only seeing t-shirts at £120 and yet still seeing skepticism at only 2/3 of the price of a Vetements t-shirt, which was selling out at £185. However, that's really only half the story. Because of the wait between the Spring-Summer 16 fashion show held in October 2015 and the release of the collection in March 2016, there had been so many fakes in that gap of 5 months that it was much harder to make sales, and so the DHL top ended up only retailing at $155, so only £116, which was less than the price of the Marcelo Berlin t-shirts, cutting the Vetements margin significantly. As a result, Vetements proposed a new system. For Autumn-Winter 16, they were going to show only 1 month before the collection was to debut in stores, giving time to create buzz, for buyers to put in orders, and have customers plan their visits by the time that it was ready to buy. It was exactly these see now, buy now collections that were being attempted or popularized at a similar time by brands like Burberry, but in a way that helped them to control one of the major issues that comes with being such a highly desirable brand. This, in the end, displayed an incredible skill not only for his desirability, world-building creation, but for a retailing skill, understanding what it was that got customers into the door and when to best make that profit, when to best encourage that kind of impulse purchase. So, really, it was for these skills that he was announced as the creative director of Balenciaga for the following season, Autumn-Winter 16. Of course, this video isn't about Balenciaga, I have already covered them here, but for Vetements, this immediately legitimized the whole company's point of view. No longer were they this band of outsiders, but they were the premier tastemakers in fashion. However, that did come at a cost. You see, now the Spring-Summer 16 and the Autumn-Winter 16 collections were going to be in stores around the same time due to the distribution adaptation, something which would have cut the potential revenue for the season. A risk risked because it's certainly better this way round than waiting a year and a bit between collections simply due to the risk of losing that much needed buzz that made this kind of distribution possible. And yet, as it happened, that is exactly what happened regardless. Because while Balenciaga was able to rise in popularity exponentially, Vetements was just simply lost in the background. It still chugged along, producing similar but slightly more colourful collections to Balenciaga through the years, but because it didn't have that historied name behind it, Balenciaga was able to bring the value to the label that bequeathed the higher price point. And Vetements just kind of got lost. This ended up being something I asked Mima Viglesio directly about, specifically because Mima, now a freelance creative consultant, was once executive vice president of communications for the Kering Group, i.e. the parent company of Balenciaga. And she told me in Instagram DMs, Vetements was great when it suddenly appeared on the scene. It was a collective, at least so we thought. It was different and it seemed free. Demna and his brother understood at the time what was needed. Rebellion, accessibility, and the freedom to dress as we pleased. It was just great and exciting. Then Demna left for Balenciaga, and Balenciaga became an expensive Vetements, and in the process, in my opinion, ruined both a bit. We'll come back to the second half of this statement in a second. And so this is how the brand would continue between that Autumn-Winter 16 through to Spring-Summer 20 timeline. Perhaps Spring-Summer 17 may be excluded from that just because it was the first Vetements show held in the Couture Fashion Week after being allowed to show there by the Chambre Syndicale de la Couture, and these boots had a significantly big viral moment because of Rihanna, who had been a champion of the brand pretty much since inception. But in general, between this maybe Spring-Summer 17, Spring-Summer 20 seasons, the brand did grow quieter, which piqued the interest of the fashion crowd as the Gvaslias had long touted that the brand was made to make profit, not to be a kind of political statement, and that was part of the irony on which the brand was founded. And so, because they had long boasted about profits, now in this state of falling popularity, the fashion interested were quick to question if they could survive their dying hype, especially after this very scathing Highsnobiety article who quoted several Vetements stockists saying that the brand was dead, they've cut their orders, and that customers have simply not been buying, blaming this, unfortunately, on the lack of design integrity, that the original design team had mostly left, and that the best designs were being sent to Balenciaga, making Vetements seem even more overpriced than it already was. Honestly, This could have been the end of the brand. This article was very impactful, very scathing. However, surprisingly, several outlets quickly came to their defense. WWD estimated an unconfirmed $80 to $100 million at retail. Lou Stoppard quotes Sarah Moa's Vogue review in the Show Studio Autumn-Winter 17 panel to say that Vetements was launching a staples collection of seasonal follow-through items, while this Vogue article claims the company to have only ever seen increasing profits from back to the first season. To quote Demna in this article in 2018, he says, "We've been profitable from season 1, and our annual turnover has been increasing ever since. We had a 50% growth in the current financial year and a 10,000% growth in the past 3 years. Currently, we're making 8 digits a season." This article also extended to the earliest Vetements stockists, and I wish I could read you the whole thing, honestly, but to give you a long quote instead, they said, "Generally, Vetements has always been a top-selling brand since we started working with them," Kay Lee of Boon the Shop in Seoul told me. The famed South Korean boutique first bought the brand for Autumn-Winter 15 and experienced a 90% sell-through. A few seasons on the budget put into Vetements is 4 times bigger. The sales volume is bigger than Celine, Saint Laurent, Loewe, etc., Lee said, noting that they've already crossed the 40% sell-through mark for Spring-Summer 18, making Vetements this season's #1 selling brand for the store. We have waiting lists, not just for the current season, but for Autumn-Winter 2018. No doubt it'll do well next season as well. In the neighboring Japan, the message is the same. Even though our budget increased more than double from last Spring-Summer as of March 31st, sell-through of Spring-Summer 2018 is already 62% in comparison to 64% for Spring-Summer 17, Sakiko Hasegawa said of the brand's sales in Tokyo's Adelaide. Our sell-through before sales has never gone under 90%, Vetements is still one of the strong-performing brands in our portfolio, Joyce's merchandising manager Michael Mock told me. Its sell-through is above our departmental average in both men's and women's. Our sales recorded double-digit growth versus last year. Joyce has carried Vetements since its very first season and has seen significant growth ever since. The article also goes on to say that Dover Street Market New York and Dover Street Market North America and Riccardi in Boston both also say that Vetements is in their top 10 brands as well in terms of sales, and though the sell-through is less than it was at its height, it was still outperforming most brands. I obviously would imagine that it did continue to drop since this time. Vetements today is not stocked by Dover Street Market New York as far as I could see, but it is still stocked by all of the Boon the Shop, Joyce, Riccardi, and so even if by a little, as the popularity has come down from the initial height, I would imagine it has fell, even if it is still good. By which I mean that it's the comparison between the high and the slightly less high that causes that speculation that drives articles like the Vogue one to be written. However, with that said, the brand really didn't do much to help shake this speculated fall. They refused to talk on the topic much, apart from a few articles here and there, and by 2020 they announced the departure of Demna, with him saying that he felt as if he had achieved his mission at the brand and leaving the company in the direction of Guram Kvaslia for Autumn-Winter 20, only then to go on an immediate break for Spring-Summer 21. Of course, that was probably for COVID, but because of the timing, it was just really unfortunate as there was such a limited time to drum up interest around Guram, and that was kind of robbed of him. When he did return for Autumn-Winter 21, simply the buzz wasn't there. The collection had been reduced to a lookbook instead of a video, and the reviews were as unfavorable as they had ever been. To quote Sarah Moa for Vogue, "Caught in controversy, that one. The distinctions between observing, commenting on, and merely mimicking real political events for profit all become dangerously blurred here. When Vetements began, Demna Kvaslia definitely pointed at questions of state control and the fear of dark forces lurking in society. It was there in his appropriations of uniforms, police, security guards, and all the way he twisted and made fun of corporate logos. Now that all of those implied warnings have been realized in so many horrific ways across the world, the idea of detached, cynical political humor, in fashion at least, has come to feel pretty off." So, Vetements was having a very hard time returning to the prominent position that it once had. Long, the conversation has really not been about the clothes themselves, but about the world building and the branding behind Vetements, and so that just saw that when the initial buzz had died down, when the initial gimmick had become normalized, there was just little substance left to keep the brand in favour. As a result, there was very little press about Spring/Summer 22, unless you count the comparison between Demna's other brand, Vetements, which is technically another company. And even Autumn/Winter 22 went by with little fanfare. Generally speaking, for many consumers, most consumers maybe, Vetements had just lost that initial appeal. As Mandy Leonard, founder of the creative consultancy company Mandy's Basement, told me in my Instagram DMs, my go-to outfit was always my full-length Vetements dress. Then, post-pandemic, not been so interested. However, if you do think I'm wrong about the Autumn/Winter 22 collection receiving little press, you're actually kind of right, because it did receive press, just not at the time of the debut. You see, in the summer of 2023, while the Autumn/Winter 22 clothes were just being phased out, there was quite a large push for press attention from the brand following a fallout between Gurum and Demna, which really was foreseen since the Vetements label, but it wasn't really picked up by the wider audience until that summer of 2023, when the awareness of the falling out heightened following a New York Times article which called Gurum the biggest thing in fashion and held a quote from Gurum talking about Demna saying, "He has had his good run of 10 years and I think his era is slowly going to the finish line. Now it's my time." This saw the fashion world re-interested in Vetements due to the drama of it all. And even soon they were being compared in their designs between Balenciaga and Vetements in their newest collection Spring/Summer 24, which was shown in the same summer of 2023. Hence why you may remember this collection, because it did get press, but only for this. In the end, this ended up being the platform to really push the Spring/Summer 24 collection in the press in such a way that nobody can convince me this wasn't very, very planned, especially now in hindsight with all of the celebrity marketing that they're doing, including having Doja Cat at the Met Gala and all the hoopla before that, and also with Billie Eilish's recent interview magazine shoot that has also gone viral. Clearly, there is a big push for promotion at Vetements at this time. Literally on debut, that Spring/Summer 24 collection was largely ignored and then only revisited when the drama happened 2 months later. I even tried to look up if they got a new PR company. I just couldn't find the information. Maybe somebody who's worked at the brand can let me know in the comments. But of course, this push didn't really always work. To continue the statement from Mima Vislexio from before, she says, "The rift between the brothers was expected, and it gave the coup the grace to both. Gurum struggles to give Vetements a new forward look and style, without the antics of a time gone. The world has moved on. People are tired of distressed t-shirts that cost more than their summer holidays, and fashionistas are eager to jump on the next train." However, with that said, in my own opinion, it was exactly during this push for press in which they seemingly, finally, started establishing purposeful codes for the house. We said before that they'd begun a core collection of evergreen products, and to be fair, they had some repeated themes. But seemingly, this is really their first active attempt at continued codes for non-profitable reasons after the following Autumn/Winter 24 season continued the ridiculously oversized clothing that the Spring/Summer 24 had gained press for. The reason this sticks out is simple because it goes against the original ethos of the brand. They initially said they were simply making clothes without design integrity to be ironic. So now, by actively using repeated themes, it shows the design intent that goes against the original ethos, because it's clearly not the 20-minute time frame of design that they bragged about before. It's not as disconnected as the collections were before. Maybe it's a bit early to call this a code after only 2 seasons. It's true they've always had oversized clothing. They've also had other continued elements between seasons as well, like text on clothing or ironic use of logos. But because they have been so open about the clothes only being there for profit, not for design integrity, until now it could just be blamed on Demna's or Gurum's personal interest, or just maybe even a coincidence. Whereas to be oversized to this extreme and then to continue that for 2 seasons feels like a purposeful departure from Demna's Vetements. I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but I'd imagine that when the new season of Spring/Summer 25 collection shows, which these videos are pre-filmed for Patreon if you didn't know, we will see this once more as a way to attempt to cement that as the first intentional signifier of the Vetements brand. You could probably also add to that the text written on clothing and generally garments like hoodies, and obviously the aforementioned logo subversions. But because these were all started before intention, just to sell seasonal clothes at a high markup, I don't think it has the same reverence, as the oversized element is more about evoking a visual identity to the brand, not necessarily directly about sales. In the end, it might not be the most unique signifier, and honestly, it still reads very Demna. It reads really trendy, which depending on your viewpoint could be considered either good or bad, but it is for that reason that I am interested to see which elements of the old design they will be bringing through to make into codes, and which they will develop into an effortful design language for the brand. But now to come back to that original thought, that original hypothesis, having seen the Spring-Summer 25 collection, not to be cruel, but unfortunately it does seem that I was right in the fact that they are now actively trying to bring through codes from the brand from copying Demna's design. The only problem with that is, in just the Spring-Summer 25 collection alone, we had the DHL logo return, this kind of gothic text return from previous seasons, and even the mise-en-scène, this setting of the escalators, is very, very similar to Autumn-Winter 17 collection that I showed you earlier. And yet, the one theme that I thought was going to be their ongoing theme for the entire brand wasn't even in it. The oversized element wasn't a main factor in this collection. So clearly, they aren't going for individual one solid brand identifier for the brand. They've just randomly gone through their history and chosen things that they want. And yet even more egregious than this was the inclusion of things like tape dresses and these printed floral dresses with matching skin-tight shoes, both of which seemingly are just copied from Demna's Balenciaga, not from Demna's Vetements. I should explain quickly the second one, however, because though the tape dresses are very obvious, the second one is maybe a little less, because Vetements have actually done printed florals with a black background before. It's just actually with the pleating/ruching pulling on that exact point at the hips, mixed with the matching skin-tight shoes, it makes it look far more influenced from Demna's Balenciaga than it does from Demna's Vetements floral dresses. You can very clearly see it's much more reminiscent of the Balenciaga version than it is to the Vetements one. This obviously is an issue for Vetements because not only does it look like the design team at Vetements are looking back for inspiration for the current collection, which I'll reiterate is completely against the original ethos of the company, but also because they're looking to Demna's Balenciaga, which frankly should have nothing to do with the brand. Vetements was against mainstream fashion, and it purposely looked at the clothes instead of the brand behind it, or even the person behind it. It was firstly a completely nameless collective. So for them to completely copy, or at least take heavy inspiration from a mainstream big name brand, is completely against everything that they stood for. To put this another way, I recently did a Coperni video and I got a comment or two saying how I was in the wrong for saying positive things about their Disneyland Paris show. However, I stick by what I said. Not because it was the most creative collection that's ever existed, because it wasn't, but my personal opinion on how subjectively good or bad the collection was is irrelevant. For Coperni, that show was on brand, gimmicky in the way that we expect it from a brand, from Coperni specifically, and it gives the customers something to reference when buying their swipe bags, which is the big selling bag from Coperni. These kind of gimmick-led brands are what is leading the way in fashion today because it gains attention. It's evolved as a natural step from Vetements, who used pure design as their gimmick, as their hook. Of course, though, with that said, Coperni isn't known for top-level design, so that's not the bar that I'm judging them on. Similarly, I cannot judge Vetements based on the achievements of others, like Demna at Balenciaga. For Vetements, I'm actively not looking for themes. I'm not looking for a vessel for them to sell bags. I'm looking for something that challenges the way that I think about fashion, and specifically what is and isn't luxury within fashion. I'm looking for clothes for Vetements. And unfortunately, with this new direction of self and even outside referencing, they're losing their original value proposition, which naturally is a dangerous thing. If I'm not getting what I'm being told that I'm being sold, it leads to a disconnect. I, as a consumer, are less likely to find value in what they're giving and therefore less encouraged to buy. Furthermore, historically, I don't think we've witnessed a brand successfully transition from being purely profit-driven, as Vetements began as, to successfully respected in design yet. At least I can't think of an example other than Topshop or Bieber, who obviously were high street brands, not in the luxury space. The thing is, in luxury, usually it's the other way around, in which a brand endlessly makes losses until they get financing that helps them expand into profit drivers, just as Coperni did. Or, on the other hand, they don't, and they close down just like Dion Lee unfortunately did. So, for Vetements to attempt this transition and to go with those trusted themes, which you would assume would bring back a repeat customer, for me as a retailing nerd should leave me very excited for the future of the brand. However, because of the Spring-Summer 25 show and that extremely risky outside referencing, I can't admit that it does. I now have pause as to how this will play out for the brand as they abandon the thing that made them important in the first place, their only true distinguisher. Personally, if I were to advise or if I were to attempt this myself, I would have done it with a bag or a shoe instead. Firstly, because that's not something the brand has ever seen major success with yet, and secondly, because audiences simply don't expect it to change every season. There was a way to do this well in that. I just think that they're currently missing the mark. Of course, though, this success is not truly mine to call. And without numbers, it is still to be seen whether this referencing can be translated well for the brand. And if not, there's still definitely time for them to turn it back around if they want to. But if I'm being honest, with the recent sale of Off-White, which I would consider to be a somewhat similar brand, going from LVMH to a new parent company that most people assume will bastardize or even cheapen the brand, I just really hope it doesn't happen for Vetements. I hope they don't go into that direction of losing that pure design ethos that they began with. For so long, Vetements stood for something so important. And we currently do not have a brand that does the same thing or that fills that same original gap. So we kind of need Vetements. We need a brand to challenge design right now, to focus so much on the clothes and less on the gimmick, the hype, the celebrity factor that seem to be selling all of the other brands, and focus so much on the clothes that we can understand its merit from product alone. That itself is something so incredibly rare in fashion today, and unfortunately, it seems like they're losing that original value of the brand, and I just really hope that it doesn't happen. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe. A big thank you does go out to June's Journey for sponsoring the video, and the QR code is once again on screen if you would like to download it. If you're interested in fashion content though, If you're interested in my beauty content, my beauty channel is linked on the screen now. And as a special thank you, and of course a special thank you goes out to my patrons over on Patreon, some of whose names are on the screen now. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.